Hi guys, I'm Kristen and this is Kristen is Fully Booked. Today I'm going to be sharing all of the books that I've been reading recently. So I filmed this video already last week or about a week ago and didn't like the way it turned out, not important, but basically what I'm going to talk about is essentially the same thing. I don't think it's really changed that much in a week except for I've added on some more things that I am currently reading and I have more of a solid plan of what's coming up next. But I have been in a really big reading funk recently. I wouldn't go so far as to say a slump because I have been reading, or at least maybe not so much the past 2 weeks, but I do have a bunch of books to share with you today that I have read recently. I'm just kind of in like a meh mood about a lot of what I've read this year. I think because I haven't had any like standout new favorites for the year. There's no new book that is like this year's Mask of Mirrors or the year before that Fireborn, like nothing that has totally swept me off my feet. And I feel like because of that, it is making me feel a little bit more kind of bland about reading overall. So with that in mind, let's talk about what I have been reading recently. I'm gonna break things down into like these were really great, these were okay, and a couple DNFs for you. So the first book in the these were really great section, I'm going to talk about, I think I have like 3 sequels or 3 books that are in a series and 1 standalone. I might as well talk about the standalone first, and that is A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking by T. Kingfisher. This is my first T. Kingfisher book, and I absolutely loved it. I only really picked it up as well because it was a book for a local book club that I have joined since moving, and I honestly just thought it was so much fun. It tells a story of kind of this world where some people have magic, they don't know how or why, and it's random, it's not inherited, it's just totally random, but our main character has baking magic. And the story that we're following is, for, reasons, Mona is suddenly the one who has to save the whole city using her baking magic. The story overall is just really cute. There's so many fun, quirky one-liners with the humor that made the book just such an enjoyable read, despite the fact that there is some more like darker tones of what's going on. This book kind of read a little bit to me like a Disney Pixar movie where I think it's young adult. I almost would go so far as to say like maybe middle grade. I'm not sure. Mona is 14 and she has like a 10-year-old sort of sidekick and a magical gingerbread companion and a magical omnivorous sourdough starter named Bob. It's genius. But what I mean by the Disney Pixar reference is sort of that there's something there that everyone could enjoy. Someone a little bit on the younger side could read this and have a really interesting, fun time, but there's enough there like written underneath, there's enough few comments or like some tone or some themes that we're exploring here that I think like grown-ups or adults would also pick up things a little bit more than younger readers. Like I said, I really enjoyed the humor of it, so I'm really excited to pick up more by this author. If you are in the same boat where you're looking to pick up more T. Kingfisher, who I think is having like a big moment right now, I would head over to my friend Sarah's channel, Bright and Bookish. Just sort of keep your eye on their channel for a while. I think that they have an amazing channel altogether. I love their TBRs, are my favorite TBRs actually to watch. The other 3 books in the This Was Pretty Great category are all sequels. So first up here is Jade War by Fonda Lee, and this is the second book in the Greenbone saga. I found Jade War a little bit less stressful. Jade War takes place over quite a few years, and it has a little bit more of a distant feel to it. Like even though it's the same characters that we knew from the first book generally, but we're skipping over jumps in time, so it feels a little bit less like you're like right there with them day to day as things are unraveling, and more like an overview of how life is changing and how the situation changes over time. That part I didn't mind so much. I actually think that she did a pretty good job of it. It just had a little bit of a different feel, but this one was a lot more geopolitical. So we're talking a lot more about the politics of not just like the No Peak clan and the Mountain clan of like this city, but we're talking about how jade trade is affecting elsewhere in the world, how the conflicts within the world are affecting John Loon and the clans, and how everything is going on there. But I had a really hard time following the geopolitical conversations while listening to audio. I think I just liked the closer feel of Jade City. even though I usually go a lot more for politics, just not necessarily geopolitics, I don't think is as much my thing. Now, there were a couple like pretty big stressful moments in this book, one of which I actually was listening on my way to a yoga class. So like something really crazy, and I was like certain that it went really, really horribly. Right before I had to stop listening and walk into a yoga class, I basically spent the whole first 10 minutes being like screaming in my head about what had happened. I think I put it down for like a week and a half because I just could not bring myself to pick it up and like hear the result of that incident. Another sequel or series book that I read here that was like, this was great category, was my read along for the Memoirs of Lady Trent book for the month of May, and that was in the Labyrinth of Drakes by Marie Brennan. This is the 4th book in the Memoirs of Lady Trent series. I absolutely love this one. It was a huge step up from book 3, which was a pretty big miss for me. I just feel like we were like right back in like a scholarly academic setting. There was some more characters that I liked that got a lot more page time than they had in the previous book. I feel also like that there was not really anything that was like overly problematic in this book. I don't think, like, I could totally be wrong. I might have missed things, but there wasn't anything that stood out as being like, ooh, I wonder what everyone else in the read-along is going to think about that. So overall, I just had a really good time with it. There was like a little bit of a romantic element, which you guys know I'm always on board with. The one thing that I will say is that she still does these really crazy rushed endings where it's like she's been like hinting and foreshadowing like this discovery the whole book. She does this every time with like something crazy happens at the end, and then she like races through telling you what's up because you're in this world. You already know what happened. And so she doesn't go into as much detail as I, who is not from her world, would like her to. So that's always a little bit frustrating to feel like how quickly the like narrator, not Marie Brennan, the narrator, Lady Trent, kind of in the future, who's telling you her story, I just feel like she sort of like rushes through her endings, and I find that really frustrating. And then the final book that was in a series that was, and also like the final book in my this was great sort of category, was the conclusion to a Chorus of Dragons series that I have been talking about nonstop this whole year, it feels like, and that was The Discord of Gods by Jen Lyons. I was really nervous going in. I did a whole video about how I was like afraid to pick it up because I didn't want to be smashed to smithereens and have all of my emotions upset and whatever. But I think it was really great. It had the least confusing structure out of the whole series so far, and at this point, our main protagonist, Kieran, is kind of supposed to be like chosen one, sort of. It's definitely like a play on a chosen one, but Kieran is someone who has asked for help from others. And so at this point, you sort of have like this like a whole gang that's working towards the like resolution of the problem, the world problem. And so you can see like the gang sort of splits up and everyone is doing their parts, and you can see as we switch from perspective to perspective how things are going and whether or not things are going well. And then on top of that, we now in this final book have both narrators. So I wasn't sure what they were going to do with the narration because we have 2 narrators in this series. And in this book, they were both narrating the story, which was so fun because then actually in the footnotes, they would like talk back and forth sometimes. It was just really interesting to see it all come together. I think that there were certain things that maybe were like a little bit too convenient for me, or not convenient, but just like maybe a little bit too tidy of an ending compared to what I was expecting. Like I was expecting a bigger mess than what the reality was. I also felt like the ending left a certain door open. If you also got that sense with like one particular character, let me know, because I feel like the author like was like, I could come back. And like, I almost guessed that we are going to return to this world, that Jen Lyons is going to return to this world. So I would be up for that. It's not my favorite character by any means, but I could be won over, and I would absolutely be interested to return to this world again. This is a series that I think my experience of looking back at having read it, of like seeing everything together, makes it so much more enjoyable, or like I have like better feelings looking back at it than I did when I was actually reading it, because a lot of the times when I was reading it I was like, this is crazy, like what is even happening? Like so much of the series you're just like along for the ride. But now looking back after everything is done, it's like looking back on like fond memories where it's like the rose-colored like hazy golden glow over your memories of looking back, is how I kind of look back at having read this series. I can't wait to reread this series. I absolutely want to. I feel like it's too soon just right now. I feel like that's all I want to say about the Discord of Gods on its own. I maybe will do a whole series review. Okay, now we're gonna get into the section of books that are just like, this was okay. So I read the novella The Willful Princess and the Piebald Prince by Robin Hobb. This is a novella that takes place within the world of the Realm of the Elderlings. It is sort of a prequel or like a historical story within this world. And Maria and I, who I'm doing the Realm of the Elderlings buddy read with, we had heard that this was a pretty good read before Tawnyman because the historical and magical context, or like the story in this book, plays a fairly significant role in the Tawnyman series, especially with the wit magic. It's going to be explored a little bit more in this next book, and this story is essentially the historical context of why the wit is viewed the way that it is. But this story overall just felt like the most tragic thing you could possibly ever read. Like, it wasn't sad because it wasn't emotionally, or I wasn't emotionally connected enough with the characters because it was so short. And just the way that it was being written, that I didn't have that emotional connection to make me feel like really, really sad and upset about things. Or no, I was upset, but like I wasn't like emotional about it. It was just extremely tragic. Then I read The Queen of Atolia by Megan Whalen Turner. This is the second book in the Queen's Thief series, which I have very, very casually been reading. From the time that I've picked up the first book, The Thief, earlier this year, I just feel like this is a series where I enjoyed enough that I can pick these books up whenever I am unsure of where to go next, and I can sort of like read this filler book. They're pretty short, so it's like a couple days worth of reading while I just like figure out where I want to go next. I have mixed feelings about this book. The second book was a lot more distant. We are going back and forth with two different perspectives. So again, the story starts with Jen being captured, but this time by the Queen of Atolia, and some stuff goes down, and then we are following both of their perspectives over the course of the book as some like tension continues to escalate between the three countries that are at play here. It just felt really distant. It felt really, really pulled back, watching things happen. There's also an element of a relationship here that I was totally willing to get on board with, but the way that it takes place made me feel cheated out of a situation. I think this series is almost well known for that there's always like a big twist. And in the big twist moment in this book, I was surprised, I was caught off guard. I was like, whoa, that's a twist I didn't see coming. And then the author kind of doubled down and added in something to that moment of like reveal and surprise that didn't need to be there, that could have taken place later, and then we would have seen things develop more and I would have felt more invested rather than feeling cheated out of development that was missing. I've heard that the next book in the series, the third book, is generally the fan favorite, so I am, and where we do get to see apparently more development, so I am willing to see more of that. Like, I will keep reading in this series. As I said, it's sort of a series that I like pick up whenever, so there's no pressure, no expectation for me to get to that anytime soon. But I wish that I had more just hints and suspicion of where things were going, rather than the big like blah blah, this is the way that it is, that we got. That is how I feel about that. You're welcome to disagree with me. And then the last book in this section of like, this was okay, is actually a contemporary women's fiction / romance book, and that was The Roughest Draft by Emily Wibberley and Austin Siegmund Broca. I would say go into this not expecting big romance. This is not like a swoon-worthy, giggling kind of a romance feel to it. It is definitely more, I would say, contemporary women's fiction. I do feel like Beach Read by Emily Henry is a good comparison here, but it is a lot less steamy even than Beach Read. So Nathan and Katrina used to write romance books together in the past. They had a couple that were okay, and then they had one huge breakout book that was extremely successful. However, the writing of that book tore apart their author duo. This book takes place a couple years after that fact, where for reasons the two have to get back together to write another book. Now this is dual perspective, so we get both Katrina and Nathan's perspectives, and we get then and now timelines where we're seeing what happened in the past and how the writing of the book is going currently. When in the then timeline, Nathan was actually married, he is now divorced, and Katrina is now engaged to their previous literary agent, or he's still her literary agent. It actually was quite heated in a like angry kind of a way, where like they are saying some pretty cruel things to each other. Things are very tense, things are really uncomfortable. There's like a lot of like beating around the bush references to what happened in the past, because like they obviously know what happened and we have a sense of what happened. I would say throughout the whole book you have like a feeling of like it's probably related to this obvious undercurrent, and it was really uncomfortable to read. You definitely don't go into this being like, ooh, swoony romance to come. You're like, ooh, this is uncomfortable to be here. So really the content warnings I think you should know about before reading this book are gaslighting and manipulative abuse and emotional affairs. Now, if all of that still sounds okay, I think too you should know that some of the writing in this book was really beautiful, like really, really beautiful. And specifically in the way that they found ways to describe certain feelings. Like the heat wasn't the heat of this, it was the heat of this. And you know exactly what that feels like because they wrote it so perfectly. And so you get these really, really perfect passages about writing or about like the human experience or about relationships. Like so just there were certain phrases. I'm not like a recorder of passages or anything like that. I don't take notes, and I read library books on my Kobo, so I don't have any of them written down. I obviously should do that. But there were so many passages in this book that I was just like, oh, that is just like the perfect way of phrasing that, or like I knew exactly what they meant or how they were feeling because of the way that they described that feeling. So super kudos to the authors on that. I would absolutely pick up another adult contemporary women's fiction. I think they've written some young adult stuff in the past, I'm not sure. But I would absolutely pick up another romance or contemporary women's fiction book by them in the future. It just wasn't like a swoon-worthy, steamy romance. Okay, before I get into the DNFs, there is one more book that I read recently, and that is I did a reread of The Liar's Knot by M.A. Carrick. This is the second book in the Rook and Rose series. I won't say too much about this. Obviously, this was a book that I read last December when it came out, and the next book isn't coming out until next year, I don't think. And I was talking about this series in my LGBTQIA plus recommendations video that came out last week by the time you're seeing this. And you know what? After I was done, I just really, really wanted to reread the relationship development that takes place in this book. For rereads though, if I've read something already within the last 12 months, I don't count it again on like my numbers for the year. So not recording this anywhere like on my like numbers recording on Goodreads or anything like that of like, this is like an additional book that I read this year because I read it within 6 months. So not plan, it's like not a number, but just like, yeah, I reread this recently and I love it. Okay, DNFs. I have DNF'd 2 books recently. One of them is like a DNF for good, I'm pretty sure, and the other one was a soft DNF when I filmed this before, but I feel like probably is a solid DNF. So one of those was The Engines of Empire by R.S. Ford. This is a new release from this year. I just don't think I should have put this on my TBR in the first place. It was sort of like when I was hearing anticipated releases videos last year, I heard about this one and I decided against it. It's like more industrial, it's like a fantasy world, but there's industry and machines, and it's like a combo of magic and industry, and those are not buzzwords for me. But I decided to pick it up because I had seen then this year when it came out a couple fairly positive reviews. They said certain things that made me feel like, well, maybe I would like that. So I picked up a copy. I think I got about 26% of the way in, and it was sort of one of those experiences where when you think about like, hey, it's time to read today, like, oh, it's that book, and you're like, and you like just don't really feel any desire to pick it up. Like it almost feels like a burden to have to keep picking the book up. That sounds really mean. I shouldn't have said the word burden, but it just wasn't doing it for me at the point that we're at too. Like things have started to get crazy and I just didn't really care. So I put it down tentatively just because I felt like it was making me be in a reading slump. Like it was making me not excited about reading. So I picked up other things, I put it down. I obviously had to return it back to the library. That one did not work for me. I'm sure there are readers out there for it. The other thing that I DNF'd was Something Wilder by Christina Lauren. This is another one that I picked up really randomly. I couldn't sleep one night. Scrimmed had the audiobook, so I put it on and was listening. And this is another one too, where like when I originally heard the premise, I was like, oh, I'm not really interested in that at all. I actually think I got like 75 to 80% into this book, like up to the point where they were like together. And I was just like, I don't need to know what else happens. Like the why they had not been together all this time was like a miscommunication error. And it gets addressed pretty early on where they're like, hey, this is the situation of what happened from my perspective. And he's like, oh my God, this is what happened from my perspective. And then they were both just like, shucks, you know, that's life. And I honestly, I wanted them to be angrier for longer. Like I felt like it took away all of the tension immediately. Just like no tension. I didn't care about the treasure hunting plot. Something like really crazy happened to like one of the group members. I don't care. The only reason I read as far as I did was because I couldn't sleep that night. So there it is. Okay, that is everything that I have read recently. What am I currently reading? So this is a section that I feel like is the most changed from when I originally filmed this last week, where I'm still reading those things, but I have now since also picked up more things, and the only thing that I like finished was my reread of The Liar's Knot. So what am I currently reading? I have been reading The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. I got this copy for Christmas. My book club back in my old city did like a Christmas book exchange, and so this is the book that I got. I finally had a chance to pick this up recently. I'm about 50% of the way in. I am thoroughly enjoying where everything goes. Like, I don't know where we're going to get to. There was like a little section, like maybe between the 30 and 50% of the mark, where I feel like it slowed down for me a little bit, but now I'm like, ooh, stuff's going again. It finally like started to get like a little bit more sapphic, like stuff was starting to happen. There was like a pretty like significant, like 45% of the book where I was unsure which female character was going to wind up in the sapphic situation that I had heard was like the biggest vibes of this book. So things have started. And then there's also like a backstory with an Achillean romance that was actually just so heartbreaking and sweet. So that's where I'm at, enjoying it. It is a slower read. Like definitely there was a section that made me slow down a lot compared to when I first picked it up. But anyway, enjoying this, absolutely. I am also reading still the first binding by R.R. Virdi, which is an anticipated fantasy, Indian fantasy, I believe. Here, let me tell you my story, very Name of the Wind-esque. So I have not read Name of the Wind though, so I can't comment on the connection there. I am only 9% in, and I am really struggling to the point that I've like picked up several books since. I'm pretty sure I've been reading it as the same time that I was reading like In the Labyrinth of Drakes and The Willful Princess and Piebald Prince and The Queen of Atolia and like probably Something Wilder, like a DNF, like, and that, and Liar's Knot, and Priory of the Orange Tree. Like, I've been reading the first binding while also reading all of those other things. And yet I'm still only 9% in. So that should tell you how that's going. Basically, it's just like really, really description heavy. I don't have a problem against description, but it's in a really thick, dramatic, overly dramatic way where I haven't even gotten to the storytelling part. It's so descriptive to the point that like every movement and decision this storyteller character makes is so overwrought with drama in how he is like moving and setting up, and like he's describing like the vibe that he's trying to go for with all of these like people around him. Like it's just a little bit much. I have heard though that if you get through that part, the storytelling part is really great. So I just gotta keep going. Two more things that I'm reading. I've got a bunch on the go right now because I'm in a weird mood, so I'm just like trying lots of different things. I am also listening to on audiobook Spear by Nicola Griffith. This book I actually had on my anticipated releases video. It was like an Arthurian retelling of one of the Knights of the Round Table, I think. Or one of King Arthur's companions. It's an Arthurian retelling. It's not Arthur or Lancelot or Guinevere. And then I decided to actually like not, even though I included it on my anticipated releases, I like took it off then, like of my own TBR. And then people started reviewing it, and it sounds so good. Like everyone that I've heard talk about this book, particularly Sarah from the channel Bright and Bookish, and Huck from the channel Badger Reads. They both said really great things about it that made me want to maybe pick it up and read it. And my library got me the audio copy first, so I've been listening to it. I'm not going to try to tell you what the setup here is like this girl who, I guess I am. It's this girl who is growing up kind of like in the wild in a cave with her mom, but she always has this feeling like there's like something out there, there's more. She keeps getting like images or feelings of like this lake, and she just knows that her destiny is like somewhere else. So she finally leaves. I don't know, gets like sucked up into stuff with like Carry with King Arthur. But that's where I'm at with that one. I'm actually apparently 80% in. I only have an hour left in the audiobook. And it's starting to get more into like stuff with like specific Arthurian legends. So a lot of the references are over my head, but I don't think that you need to have those, like a complete understanding of those references in order to enjoy this book. But it's one of those books that like feels like you're being told this like old-timey oral story. And then the other thing that I am reading is another novella, which is A Mirror Mended by Alex E. Harrow. And this is the second book in the Fractured Fables series. The first book was A Spindle Splintered, and this is also an e-arc from NetGalley. This one is working for me. I like being back with Zinnia. In the first book, Zinnia was a 21-year-old person with a medical condition of which there was no cure, and she was only predicted to have a lifespan of 21 years, and on her 21st birthday she pricks her finger on a spindle and gets sucked into an alternate universe of Sleeping Beauty. And so it's sort of like a fractured Sleeping Beauty retelling in this story, Mirror Mended. She has been doing her whole thing with the Sleeping Beauty stuff, which I won't detail, but if you know from the first book, like she's on a bit of a Sleeping Beauty journey, and she looks in a mirror and it's not herself that she sees. It is very clearly like an evil queen from a different storyline or a different fairy tale, and she gets sucked into that story instead of various iterations of the Sleeping Beauty story. So this one is a Snow White-ish retelling. They're not really retellings, or like retakes on the stories. With like very meta, like we know that we're talking, like Zinnia is from our world, talking about the fact that she's in like different iterations of this story. But this time we're not doing Snow White, we're doing the Evil Queen. What is up next? I do have like actual places to go from here. I took out from the library Kai Kai, which everyone is raving about right now, which came out recently in April by Vaishnavi Patel. And this is sort of a retelling of an Indian mythological story where we are following the perception of the usually like villainous evil stepmother sort of a thing. So I'm seeing lots of good reviews for that. I have seen some like more mediocre average reviews. So I'm going in like, you know, aware that this might not knock me off my socks, but maybe it does. I did say socks funny there. I also, just the other day, or just a couple days ago from the library, The Hunger of the Gods came up by John Gwynne, and I foolishly took it out from the library. So now I have like a limited amount of days to read that before I have to go back on hold for like months again. So I have to get to that one as well. This is the second book in the Bloodsworn saga. I read the first book, Shadow of the Gods, last year. Really loved it. It was one of my top 10 books from last year. What else do I have coming up next? Fool's Errand by Robin Hobb. This is the first book in the Tawny Man trilogy. I'm going to be buddy reading this with Maria, and we are probably getting to it by the time you're seeing this. I think it's this week that we're going to be picking up. So I've got a lot of big books that I'm supposed to be getting to. And then also I have to read Within the Sanctuary of Wings, the fifth and final book in the Memoirs of Lady Trent series by Marie Brennan. This is the June book for the Memoirs of Lady Trent read along that I'm doing with all of those other channels that I've mentioned in the past. This is the last book. I think we are going to be doing the companion book, but we will decide that over on the Discord. But Within the Sanctuary of Wings is the last Lady Trent specific book. So I have to read that sometime soon. We had to delay the live show for In the Labyrinth of Drakes. So that is going to be, it's going to be on June 18th. The only time that I know off the top of my head is that it is 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, or PST. So do all of the time zone math to figure out where that is, or when that is for you. And this is going to be on Maria's channel, Tea Books Magic. Also, you can check out the Discord where you can join us to talk about Memoirs of Lady Trent, over on Sarah's Discord. Okay, but that is it. Those are all the things that are coming up next. I hope that I'm in the mood to read all of those things. I have like 4 books on the go right now, and like a solid 4 books that I have to pick up in the next 2 weeks. I hope to have some like big wins and successes. I really need some like new books that just like sweep me off my feet these days, because so far it's been like only an okay year. Okay, but that is it. Let me know, what are you reading right now? What do you have coming up next? Have you read any of the books that I talked about today? And do you agree or disagree with what I said about them? I will see you guys next time. Have a great day. Bye.